It wakes you in a specific way, not gradually, all at once, mid-sleep, with a muscle in your calf seizing before you are conscious. You grab the leg, try to straighten it, press your heel down, and for 30 seconds, nothing helps. Then, it releases. You know this exactly. The explanation most people have been given for night leg cramps is dehydration, or a deficiency of magnesium, calcium, or potassium. It is the explanation because it is simple, and because it generates a specific set of interventions. Drink more water. Eat a banana before bed. Take a magnesium tablet. For a significant proportion of adults over 60, these interventions produce inconsistent or no improvement, and the cramps continue because the explanation was incomplete. Night leg cramps are not primarily a muscle problem, and they are not primarily a mineral problem. They are a nerve signal problem. The muscle is contracting because a nerve told it to. The nerve told it to, because the system that regulates when it fires broke down. Understanding that distinction is the only way to interrupt the pattern, rather than simply managing around it. Subscribe before we go into the mechanisms. The fix from the title takes 60 seconds. The explanation of why it works takes longer. And without the explanation, the fix is a technique you follow without understanding, which means you stop doing it the moment it seems unnecessary. Subscribe. The next time you need this video, it will be waiting. There is a specific quality to the day after a night cramp and the night before the next one that people with this pattern recognize without having named either. In the morning, the calf carries a tenderness that is different from exercise soreness, a bruised sensitivity in the muscle belly that makes you place the foot more carefully on the floor and descend the first few stairs with a slight adjustment in how the weight lands. By mid-morning, it has largely faded, and by evening, it is gone. And then, as bedtime approaches, something quieter arrives. A particular awareness of the leg, a faint preoccupation with how to position yourself tonight, which side might be safer, whether the foot should be higher or lower or differently angled. You do not avoid sleep. You approach it with a background calculation that was simply not part of your evenings 3 years ago, and that has accumulated so gradually you have accepted it as simply how nights are now, without questioning whether it had to become this way at all. Here is the specific failure in the standard conversation about this symptom. When night leg cramps are raised at an appointment, the response is almost always one of two things: advice to increase fluid and electrolyte intake, or a request for a blood panel that shows normal magnesium and potassium levels and produces no further investigation. What is almost never explained is the motor neuron mechanism, the role of foot position during sleep, or the documented relationship between specific medications and cramp frequency. The electrolyte explanation is not wrong. Electrolytes are involved in muscle contraction and relaxation, but it is incomplete in a way that explains why the recommended interventions work inconsistently, and it leaves the actual mechanism of the symptom unnamed in the conversation that is supposed to address it. Mechanism 1. Motor neuron hyperexcitability. Here is the fact that changes how this symptom should be understood. A night leg cramp is not a muscle that runs out of something. It is a muscle that receives an unsolicited contraction signal from the nerve controlling it. The specific structure involved is the motor neuron in the spinal cord that innervates the calf muscle. During sleep, this motor neuron becomes hyperexcitable, meaning its threshold for firing drops below the level required during waking hours, and it begins producing spontaneous discharge signals that travel to the calf muscle and instruct it to contract. The muscle has no option but to obey. It contracts. The cramp begins. Think of a smoke alarm whose detection threshold has been set too low. In normal function, the alarm activates only in the presence of genuine smoke. When the threshold is miscalibrated, it fires from steam, from dust, from the simple absence of ventilation. A night leg cramp is a muscle receiving an alarm signal from a nerve that should have been silent because the system that normally maintains the motor neuron's firing threshold at an appropriate level is no longer doing so. Research published in Muscle and Nerve and referenced in a clinical review in the New England Journal of Medicine confirms that abnormal spontaneous discharge of lower limb motor neurons during sleep is the primary initiating mechanism of nocturnal leg cramps, independent of electrolyte levels in the majority of cases. Mechanism 2. The foot position problem. The second mechanism explains why this happens specifically during sleep, and why changing one thing about how you sleep can produce a measurable reduction in cramp frequency without changing anything else. When you lie in bed during sleep, your foot naturally relaxes into plantar flexion, pointing slightly downward toward the floor. This is the position of least muscular effort, which is why it feels comfortable. But the calf muscle has two attachment points, one near the knee and one at the heel via the Achilles tendon. When the foot points downward, the calf muscle shortens. When the calf muscle remains in a shortened position for several hours, it reduces the activity of the Golgi tendon organs, which are stretch receptors embedded in the muscle tendon that continuously send inhibitory signals to the spinal cord motor neurons, telling them to hold their firing in check. Remove that inhibitory brake from a motor neuron that is already hyperexcitable by the mechanism described above, and the conditions for a cramp are complete. This is exactly what was happening with someone I will call Brian. Brian is 70, a retired civil engineer from northern England, who had been experiencing cramps 3 to 4 times per week for 2 years. He had tried increasing his water intake, eating a banana before bed, and 2 different magnesium products purchased at the pharmacy. Nothing produced consistent improvement. What Brian had never changed was his sleep setup. He slept on his back, with sheets tucked tightly at the foot of the bed, which held his feet in plantar flexion for 8 hours every night. Within 2 weeks of loosening the foot tuck and adding 5 slow dorsiflexion exercises before sleep, his cramp frequency dropped from 4 times per week to once in 3 weeks. No new purchase required. Research published in the Clinical Journal of Medicine confirms foot position as a primary contributing factor to nocturnal cramp frequency, with positional correction producing clinically significant reductions in event occurrence. Mechanism 3. Medication-induced motor neuron sensitization. The third mechanism is the one most people are not told when the responsible medication is prescribed, and it applies to a group of drugs that are among the most commonly taken by adults over 60. Statins, which are prescribed for cholesterol management and cardiovascular risk, list nocturnal muscle cramps as a documented side effect in the prescribing literature. Research published in the American Journal of Medicine identified statin-associated muscle cramps as a significant adverse effect, particularly at higher doses, with the mechanism involving changes in the cellular environment of motor neurons that lower their firing threshold. Diuretics, prescribed for blood pressure management and heart failure, reduce the availability of potassium and magnesium in the tissue surrounding lower limb motor neurons, directly raising their excitability above the normal nocturnal threshold. Beta agonists used in respiratory conditions and certain blood pressure medications appear on the documented list of drugs associated with nocturnal leg cramps in published pharmacology literature. Most patients taking these medications were not told that leg cramps were a likely consequence. Most appointments that receive a complaint of nighttime leg cramps do not review the medication list from the previous month to look for a new addition that coincides with the symptoms' onset or worsening. The meeting that produced the prescription and the meeting that receives the cramp complaint are rarely the same conversation. Here is the 60-second fix. It works because it uses the motor neuron's own inhibitory system to override the misfiring signal. When a cramp begins, the instinct is to curl the foot inward, protect the leg, and wait it out. This extends the cramp. The foot curling inward shortens the calf further, which deepens the plantar flexion position that removed the Golgi tendon organ's inhibitory signal in the first place. Do the opposite. Straighten the leg completely. Pull the foot actively and firmly toward the shin, as far as it will go. Hold that position without relaxing. What you are doing is stretching the Achilles tendon, which activates the Golgi tendon organ and sends an inhibitory signal directly to the misfiring motor neuron in the spinal cord, instructing it to cease firing. This signal travels faster than the cramp can sustain itself against it. The muscle releases. For maximum speed, stand simultaneously if you are able. Place the foot flat on the floor, heel down, and bear your full weight through it. The proprioceptive input from weight bearing through the heel delivers a second inhibitory pathway to the same motor neuron from a different receptor system. Standing and pulling the foot up toward the shin at the same time produces cramp resolution faster than either intervention alone. Time the next one from the moment of correct application. 30 to 60 seconds is the typical resolution window when the technique is used correctly, rather than the instinctive response of curling and protecting. The root protocol addresses the underlying motor neuron hyperexcitability so that the 60-second fix is needed less often. Tonight, before you sleep, loosen the foot of your bedsheet completely. If you tuck your sheets tightly, or if the weight of heavy bed covers holds your feet in a downward position, that is the foot position mechanism operating across your entire night. Your feet need to be free to rest in a neutral angle, rather than passively held in the plantar flexed position that suppresses the Golgi tendon organ for hours. Before you get into bed, do 5 slow dorsiflexions on each foot. Sitting on the edge of the bed, flex each foot firmly upward toward the shin. Hold for 5 seconds and release. Repeat 5 times on each side. This pre-activates the inhibitory pathway through the Golgi tendon organ and sets the motor neuron threshold at a more appropriate level before it enters the reduced feedback environment of sleep. During the day, stand arm's length from a wall and perform a calf stretch 3 times on each side. 1 foot back, heel flat on the floor. Lean gently forward until you feel the calf lengthen. Hold for 20 to 30 seconds. This maintains the resting length of the gastrocnemius and soleus and reduces the degree of passive shortening that occurs during sleep. For the dietary foundation, the foods with the highest magnesium content available without any supplement include dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, black beans, and avocado. These provide the mineral in a form the body processes efficiently through food, rather than requiring the digestive system to extract it from a manufactured tablet form. Review any statin, diuretic, or beta agonist you take with your prescribing doctor, specifically in the context of nocturnal leg cramps. Do not stop or change any medication without that conversation. The connection between the prescription and the symptom belongs in the clinical record, not managed around at home. 5 steps. 3 of them happen before you sleep tonight. 1. Loosen or completely untuck the foot of your bedsheet tonight before you lie down. Your feet need to rest in a neutral position, not held downward. 2. Do 5 dorsiflexions on each foot tonight before you get into bed. Foot up toward the shin, hold 5 seconds, release. 5 repetitions, each side, 2 minutes. 3. Identify whether you take a statin, a diuretic, or any respiratory inhaler medication, and write down when those cramps started relative to when the medication started. Bring that timeline to your next appointment. 4. The next time a cramp wakes you tonight, or any night, straighten the leg immediately and pull the foot forcefully upward toward the shin. Stand if you can, heel flat on the floor. Hold it. Count. 60 seconds or fewer when applied correctly. 5. Replace your next banana before bed with a portion of pumpkin seeds or dark leafy greens at dinner. The magnesium in food form reaches the tissue around motor neurons more efficiently, and it comes without the sugar load that can disrupt the sleep quality already being broken by the cramps. One thing from you before you close this. Write in the comments everything you have already tried for night leg cramps, and next to each one, write honestly whether it helped. And don't forget to subscribe.